My name is Vivian Thorne, and for 42 years, I lived as a footnote in my own family story. The quiet sister, the archivist who preferred dust to diamonds, silence to scandal. I was the neutral backdrop against which their colorful, dramatic lives were painted, a curator of the past while they consumed the present with voracious, careless hunger. That Sunday began like every other family brunch at my brother Julian's McMansion in the Heights, a performance of perfection. Sunlight glittered off the chlorine blue water of their pointless infinity pool, the air smelled of imported espresso, expensive sunscreen, and the faint, acrid scent of credit burning. I arrived early, as always, to help. Not that Blair, Julian's wife, would ever soil her designer linen. My role was to be the unseen stagehand, arranging the artisanal pastries on slate platters, ensuring the mimosa pitchers were full, nodding politely as Julian held court about market fluctuations he barely understood. I wore my uniform. A simple linen shift, flat sandals, and my grandmother's bracelet, the Eleanor Vanguard. It was my one vanity, my one connection to a woman of substance in a family of surfaces. A delicate Art Deco piece in platinum, its safety chains so finely wrought it was nearly invisible. It was my armor. My 16-year-old niece, Sloane, was holding court by the pool's edge, her phone aloft. A live stream, her voice, sharp and artificially sweet, cut through the gentle jazz Blair had curated. Fam, look what happens when you don't upgrade your accessories, Sloane trilled to her digital audience. The camera panned to me as I set down a tray. My Aunt Viv is like a museum piece herself. Literally, she works in one. Polite, cruel laughter from her followers chirped from the phone. My cheeks warmed, but I kept my smile, a practiced, placid mask. Don't make a scene, Vivian. Sloane swanned over, her eyes not on me, but on her own reflection in the screen. What even is that thing? She gestured with her chin at my wrist. Before I could pull my hand back, her fingers, strong and entitled, closed around the bracelet. A jolt went through me. Sloane, don't. Is it like real? She addressed her phone. Let's see if it's as cheap as it looks. It happened in slow motion and yet too fast to stop. She didn't fumble for the clasp. She gave a sharp, dismissive yank, intending to pull the whole piece over my hand. The sound was not a ping. It was a dry, sickening snap. The whisper-thin safety chain, a miracle of 1942 craftsmanship, sheared in two. Time stopped. The broken piece of my history, a curl of dead platinum, spun through the air and landed with a tiny, tragic clink on the imported Portuguese limestone. The live stream was still going. A chorus of OMGs and laughing emojis scrolled up the screen. I stood frozen, my arm outstretched, the violated bracelet hanging loose. A visceral pain, sharp and cold, lanced from my wrist straight to my sternum. It wasn't just metal, it was the last tactile memory of my grandmother's papery skin against mine. It was the smell of her lavender sachets and the sound of her voice telling me, "Strength isn't loud, Vivian. It's deep. It endures." I looked from the broken chain on the stone to Sloane's face. She wasn't horrified. She was amused, bored even. "Oops," she said, her voice a caricature of apology. She panned the phone to the broken bit. "My bad. Guess it was garbage anyway." My gaze swept the tableau. Julian had seen it. He met my eyes for a fraction of a second, then took a slow, deliberate sip of his mimosa, his expression saying, "Don't be dramatic, V. It's just a thing." Blair, sensing a disruption in her aesthetic, finally glanced over. "Sloane, darling, you're blocking the light. Vivian, can you move the hydrangeas? They're looking wilted." No one moved to pick up the piece. No one told Sloane to apologize. The sun beat down, the pool pump hummed, and my family consumed the moment of my humiliation like it was just another canapé. A seismic shift occurred inside me. Not an explosion, but an icequake. A continent of frozen resentment, years of swallowed words, of paid bills received with grunts instead of gratitude, of birthdays forgotten, and my successes dismissed. It all calved, broke away. And what was left behind was not hot rage, but a polar, desolate clarity. I bent down. The stone was warm. I picked up the broken chain. It felt lighter than it should, a ghost of itself. I carefully unhooked the main bracelet from my wrist, cradling both pieces in my palm. The metal was still warm from my skin, a corpse with fading warmth. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was flat, final. The voice of an archivist stating a fact. Julian waved a hand without looking. "All right, Vi, don't forget Mother's sapphires need appraising for the Met Gala next weekend." He thought I was talking about stepping inside. He didn't understand I was talking about forever. I walked through the soaring, empty living room that echoed with debt, past the kitchen where the renovation fund envelope was actually stuffed with foreclosure warnings, and out the grand front door that led only to a hollow fantasy. In my car, I placed the 2 pieces of platinum on the passenger seat. I didn't cry. I stared at them as I drove, the world outside blurring into a smear of green and gold. The pain had crystallized into something usable, something sharp. It was no longer grief, it was intelligence. The cipher in the ledger. My sanctuary was a pre-war apartment in the old city, filled not with trendy minimalist furniture, but with the solid, comforting ghosts of the past. Overflowing bookshelves, a grandfather clock that ticked with patient rhythm, Persian rugs worn soft by time. Here, the air smelled of lemon oil, leather bindings, and my own quiet existence. I went straight to my grandmother's antique writing desk, not the modern laptop on my work table, but the one with the brass inlay and the hidden compartment. From it, I withdrew a simple, unmarked manila envelope, its edges worn soft. Inside was a single heavy key and a slip of paper with an address and a 12-digit alphanumeric code. It was the only inheritance my grandmother, Eleanor, left solely to me. Not the jewelry, not the stock portfolios that Julian fought over. This, for the keeper of the truth, she'd whispered on her deathbed, her grip surprisingly strong. The rest is noise. This is the foundation. Don't be afraid to use it. I had been afraid. For 10 years, I'd been afraid. I'd used the monthly stipend it provided to live simply, to fund my quiet passions, but I'd never accessed the core, the Vanguard Consolidated Trust. That night, I did. The address led to a nondescript, fortress-like building in the financial district, a private vault. The key and the code granted me entry to a sterile room containing only a wall of safe deposit boxes and a secure terminal. My hands were steady as I typed. The interface that bloomed on the screen was not a simple banking portal. It was a dynastic map, a labyrinth of interconnected trusts, holding companies, and foundations stretching back to the 19th century. At the center, like a spider in a web of platinum threads, was my name, Vivian Eleanor Thorne, sole executor and protector. I navigated to the distributions ledger, and there, in cold clinical courier font, was the story of my family's lie. Account: Julian Thorne living allowance. Status: active. Monthly: $25,000. Source: Vanguard Principal. Account: Blair Thorne Venture Fund. Status: active. Total disbursed: $485,000. Source: Vanguard Arts and Culture Subtrust. Account: Sloan Thorne Education and Enrichment. Status: active. Annual tuition: St. Ignatius, $72,000. Annual discretionary: $50,000. Source: Vanguard Future Generations Fund. Line after line, a hemorrhage of capital. The down payment on the house, the lease payments on the fleet of German cars, the bailout for Julian's failed blockchain art venture, the 6-figure loan to Blair's influencer agency that never filed taxes. I had known I was helping. I hadn't comprehended the scale. I was not their benefactor. I was their oxygen supply. And they, in their gilded bubble, thought they were breathing on their own. A new tab glowed, protocols and clauses. I clicked. My grandmother, the brilliant, ruthless Eleanor, had been a legal strategist. She'd built not just wealth, but consequences. Clause 7.1, Dissipation of Assets. Beneficiary funds used for purposes demeaning to the family legacy or its tangible history may be suspended. Clause 12.4, Moral turpitude. Conduct by a beneficiary or their direct issue that brings the family name into disrepute or willfully damages familial heritage assets triggers a mandatory review and potential forfeiture. Familial heritage assets. A categorized list. I searched. Item number 0017, the Eleanor Vanguard bracelet. Designer, Lucien Fontenay. Provenance, gift from Lucien Fontenay to Eleanor Thorne, 1942. Category, A, irreplaceable. Insured value, $850,000. Historical value, inestimable. A sound escaped me, a half-choked gasp. $850,000. Not a trinket, a masterpiece, a piece of history. Sloane had snapped a chain worth more than her father's annual allowance, and she had done it on a live stream, willfully, with malice and for entertainment. The pieces of my new resolve, harder and brighter than the broken platinum, clicked into place. My cursor hovered over Sloane's tuition line. With 3 deliberate clicks, I changed the status. Revoked. Reason selected from a drop-down menu. Violation of Clause 12.4. Willful damage to Category A heritage asset. A confirmation box appeared. Revocation triggers Cascade Audit Alpha. Review all disbursements to impacted branch for compliance with Clause 7.1. Proceed? My finger trembled for the first time. This wasn't turning off a tap. This was collapsing the dam. I saw Julian's smug face, Blair's dismissive eyes, Sloane's vicious grin. I clicked yes. The screen flashed. Cascade Audit Alpha initiated. Estimated completion, 72 hours. All discretionary distributions to impacted branch frozen pending review. I logged out. The sterile room was silent. I placed the key back in the envelope. The walk back to my car felt like moving through a different dimension. The city lights were sharper, the sounds clearer. I had just pressed a button in a silent room, and I knew with absolute certainty that a world was about to end. The first cracks in the facade. The silence held for 36 exquisite hours. I went to work at the museum, moving through the hollowed, hushed galleries with a new sense of kinship with the relics. I, too, was an artifact that had been underestimated. My personal phone remained dark. My work email pinged with mundane queries about donor lists and conservation reports. I felt a strange electric calm. I was the eye of the hurricane I had summoned. The first fissure appeared at 9:17 a.m. on Tuesday. My personal phone lit up, not with a call, but with a series of staccato text explosions. Blair, Vivian, the Academy bursar just called. They say my scholarship is terminated. There's been a mistake, a glitch. You need to call them immediately. Use your letterhead. Fix this. Julian, 2 minutes later. V, what's going on with St. Ignatius? They're talking about a conduct violation. Did Sloane get in a tiff with some donor's kid? You're good with these people. Smooth it over. We can't have this before the Hamptons trip. Sloane, a voice memo. Aunt Viv, this is so uncool. My dean is being a total witch. She says my funding's gone and it's non-negotiable. You have to, vouch for me or something. Also, I need a new gown for the end-of-year gala. Valentino, since you're making me deal with this stress, you can just order it. 'Kay? Thanks. I played the voice memo twice. The entitlement was so pristine, so unblemished by self-awareness, it was almost awe-inspiring. She wasn't asking, she was redistributing my burdens as her due. I didn't respond. I placed the phone in my desk drawer and closed it softly. The silence was my reply. By Wednesday, the tone had curdled from annoyance to panic. The Cascade Audit was doing its work. Julian, call, missed, voicemail. Vivian, pick up. This isn't funny. My line of credit at the club was just declined. The club, V. The portfolio manager is talking about a mandatory review of our assets. What have you said to someone? Did you complain about Sloan? For God's sake, she's a child. Call me back. We need to contain this. His voice was a rusty nail scraping metal. The fear underneath the bluster was delicious. I finally broke my silence that evening, not to them, but to the one person who might understand the architecture of collapse. I sent a secure, encrypted email to Alastair Finch, the ancient, discreet lawyer who served as the trust's external counsel. My grandmother had introduced me once. If you ever need to understand the gears, Vivian, he is the clockmaker. His reply was swift. Miss Thorne, the Alpha audit is proceeding. Preliminary findings suggest significant dissipation of funds for purposes contrary to the Trust's cultural preservation mandate. The trigger event, item 0017, is clear. Your instructions? I wrote back, proceed to the letter of the protocols. No warnings, no negotiations. Understood. The freeze on all discretionary distributions to the Julian Thorne branch is now total and public. The institutions have been notified. Total and public. That meant the country club, the art gallery where Blair had her installations, the luxury car dealership, the dermatologist, the personal trainer, all of them now knew the Thornes' money was no good. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was in their living room. The unmasking. They arrived at my apartment door just after 7 p.m. on Thursday, a ragged phalanx of fading glamour. Julian's face was gray, etched with lines of terror he could no longer Botox away. Blair's usually impeccable makeup was smudged, giving her the look of a startled raccoon. Sloan lurked behind them, headphones on, scrolling her phone, a portrait of a grieved adolescence. I opened the door before they could pound. I didn't step aside. We need to talk, now. Julian tried to push past me. I stood firm, a doorstop of quiet resolve. You can say what you need to say here, Julian. Inside, Vivian, Blair hissed, glancing down the hall as if their disgrace might be contagious. I relented, letting them flood into my calm, book-lined space. It seemed to offend them, my tangible peace. What did you do? Julian exploded, pacing before my fireplace like a caged tiger. The bank is calling in a margin loan. The club has suspended our membership. My dentist is asking for payment up front. This is a coordinated attack, and it started the day after you had your little tantrum about that stupid bracelet. It's not a stupid bracelet, I said, my voice low but penetrating. It is item 0017, a Category A irreplaceable familial heritage asset, insured for $850,000. The number hung in the air, sucking the oxygen from the room. Even Sloan looked up, her eyebrows raised. That's absurd, sputtered Julian. Grandmother's old jewelry? Gifted to her by Lucien Fontenay in 1942, the founder of the Fontenay Foundation, the primary endowment donor to, among other things, St. Ignatius Academy of the Arts. I let the connection sink in. I saw the moment it clicked for Julian. His bloodshot eyes widened. No. Yes. Your daughter, for the entertainment of strangers, willfully destroyed a cornerstone artifact of the very cultural legacy that pays for her life. The trust has protocols, Julian. You've been bleeding it dry for a decade, funding a parody of success. The bracelet was just the trigger. The audit was the consequence. Blair found her voice, a shrill weapon. You did this? You have this power? All this time while you let us thank you for your little checks? You never thanked me, I said, a lifetime of hurt crystallizing into that one flat sentence. You tolerated me, the useful spinster, the walking, talking checkbook with a library card. You lived in a house of cards built on my signature, and you laughed at the hand that held the wall up. I walked to my desk and picked up a single sheet of paper, the Alpha Audit's executive summary, sent by Finch an hour before. I handed it to Julian. His eyes scanned the figures, the color drained from his face, a true mortal pallor. The down payment, the cars, Blair's studio, Sloane's, all of it? All of it, I confirmed, from the Vanguard Consolidated Trust, of which I am the sole executor, a role grandmother gave to me because she knew money as something to spend, not something to steward. Sloane finally yanked her headphones off. Wait, so like you're rich and you've been, what, spying on us? And now you're cutting us off because I broke your ugly bracelet? That's so toxic, so abusive. I'm a minor. I turned my full gaze on her. For the first time, I didn't see a child. I saw the perfect product of her environment. Beautiful, hollow, and dangerous. You are a vandal, I said, each word a chip of ice. You were given a world of privilege, of art, of history, and you treated it as your personal trash can. You don't deserve the legacy you were born into, so it's being taken away. Not to punish you, to save it from you. The finality in my voice broke through her petulance. Real fear flickered in her eyes. You can't... Dad! Julian was staring at the paper, his hands shaking. She can, Sloane. The trust, it's airtight. She controls it all. He looked at me, a broken man. Vivian, please, we're family. We'll make it right. We'll pay for the bracelet. Sloane will apologize. It's too late for apologies, I said. The mechanism is in motion. The discretionary funds are frozen permanently. The principal of your branch's share will be placed in a protective trust until Sloane is 35, contingent on her completing a degree in art conservation or historical preservation and performing 2,000 hours of community service in museum restoration. You can't dictate her life, Blair shrieked. I just did, I said. Or she gets nothing, ever. The house will be sold to cover the tax liabilities and outstanding debts the audit has uncovered. You'll receive a modest annuity, enough to live, not enough to pretend. I walked to the door and held it open. The message was unmistakable. They left not with a bang, but with a whimper. Julian looked hollowed out. Blair was silently weeping, the performative tears finally real. Sloane stared at the floor, her phone forgotten in her hand, the first true consequence of her life dawning on her. The door clicked shut. I leaned against it, the adrenaline receding, leaving a vast, echoing quiet. I had just dismantled a universe. I expected to feel guilt, triumph, something. Instead, I felt a profound, weary solitude. The aftermath and the artifact. The collapse was swift and merciless, a lesson in structural engineering. Without the constant intravenous drip of trust funds, the lifestyle metabolized itself in weeks. The McMansion sold at a loss to a crypto entrepreneur. Julian and Blair moved into a rented townhouse in a neighborhood where no one knew their names. The German cars were repossessed. Blair's influencer brand evaporated. Her followers were revealed to be mostly bots purchased with trust money. Sloane was formally expelled from St. Ignatius. The video of the bracelet snap, which she'd left public, was found by the Fontenay Foundation. They issued a scathing statement about respect for cultural patrimony, effectively blacklisting her from every elite institution in the field. I followed the protocols, but I wasn't cruel. The modest annuity was enough for them to live without want. It was the obscurity that was the punishment, the silence where there had been constant, empty noise. 6 months after the snap, I received a package at the museum, no return address. Inside, nestled in foam, was the Eleanor Vanguard bracelet, a note from the world's finest platinum smith, commissioned by the trust. Repaired, the scar is left visible, as requested. A testament. I wore it to the opening of the new Fontenay wing at the museum, a project I'd quietly championed and funded from the Trust's cultural mandate. I stood before the display case for item 0017, not the bracelet, but its story. A placard told the tale. This piece, broken and restored, speaks to the fragility and endurance of legacy. It reminds us that value is not assigned by price, but by meaning, and that what is broken can be made whole again though never quite the same. Across the crowded gallery, I saw them. Julian, looking older but less strained, standing beside Blair, who wore a simple, elegant dress, not a costume. They were watching Sloane. She was not on her phone. She was standing before a display of Lucien Fontenay's early sketches, her nose almost pressed to the glass. A museum intern was speaking to her, pointing out a detail. Sloane nodded, asking a question. Her face was not bored or entitled. It was curious, open. She turned and saw me. Our eyes met across the span of the room, across the chasm of broken platinum and broken trust. She didn't scowl. She didn't look away. She simply nodded, a small, grave gesture. Then she turned back to the sketches. Later, a letter arrived at my apartment, on thick, plain paper. Aunt Vivian, I'm taking a night class at the community college, HI History 101. The professor is tough. She says I have a lot to unlearn. I've been reading about Lucien Fontenay. He believed beauty had a duty. I didn't understand that before. I think I'm starting to. I'm sorry, not for what I lost, for what I broke. Sloane. I held the letter, the paper solid and real in my hands. I placed it in my grandmother's desk, in the hidden compartment beside the vault key. Not as a record of victory, but as the first page of a new, uncertain archive. The silence in my apartment is no longer the silence of the overlooked. It is the rich, deep quiet of a restored masterpiece. The tick of the grandfather clock is the steady heartbeat of a legacy I finally understand. They thought I was just preserving the past. They never imagined I was capable of engineering the future. And in the end, the most powerful revenge was not their poverty, but my peace. Not their downfall, but my ascent. Not to their gilded world, but to my own sovereign, quiet country, where the only value that matters is the one you forge yourself, in fire, in ice, and in the unwavering light of truth. If this story of silent ledgers and loud consequences resonated with you, then you understand that true power often whispers. Subscribe to Clara's Revenge. Hit that notification bell, because every week we delve into the archives of betrayal, where the quietest people hold the deadliest receipts. Your support helps us preserve these stories of stunning justice. Subscribe now and join a community that knows the past is never truly broken, just waiting for the right archivist to restore it.